So we were out there one night, and there was a young man. He had a Christian background, came from Mexico, but he wasn't following the Lord. God just got a hold of his heart, and he gave his life to the Lord. He wanted to get baptized. And so for the first time, and I think that was probably the last time it happened, we got permission to actually do a baptism right there in the main plaza in Madrid.
Wow.
And so he's out there publicly
Yeah.
giving testimony of what Jesus has done in his life, getting baptized. While that's happening, there's another young man that's watching. He was just sobbing and sobbing and sobbing. And when some people went over to talk to him, minister to him, he also had a Christian background, but he was not following the Lord.
Yeah.
He actually gave his life to the Lord at the same time that this other young man was getting baptized.
Wow. My name is Amy Clausen, and I'm the missions director at Bethel's Rock Church in Minnesota. In today's episode, we have the honor of speaking with Karen Prevost, who lives and serves with her husband Kevin in Spain. Hi, Karen. Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, it's great to be with you, Amy. Thanks so much.
Yeah, absolutely. So can we just start off with you telling us a little bit about yourself, telling us about giving us kind of a broad overview of your ministry, your time on the fields?
Well, we just finished 40 years in missions.
Wow.
Just a couple months ago. I mean, it's a lifetime, but it's gone by so fast.
Yeah.
It's been such a privilege to serve the Lord in Spain. We've only been in Spain.
Yeah.
When we went out, God never changed the direction, and that's just been our heart. That's just been our focus. And we've lived in several different places in Spain through the years. And each one was a different journey. Each one is all the things that the Lord's teaching you. And we were young. We didn't have a family when we went over. And all of our kids were born in Spain.
Wow.
They were all raised there. And we just got plunged into the culture. And, the Spaniards were our closest friends. And just absolutely loved what God has done through the years.
Yeah. I'm sure you have so many stories being there for 40 years, raising a family, and stories of like all different, kinds. But what's something that sticks out to you as either a favorite or just something really unexpected or crazy that happened? What is like one of those stories that you just love to share?
Well, this one goes back a little ways.
Okay.
So our youngest son, Daniel, was 4 at the time. Now he's in his 30s. But we were pastoring a church, planting a church in a small city in Spain. And there was a friend of ours. They were missionaries from Great Britain, and they were in a neighboring town. And so we kind of supported one another, and they were doing a meeting at their house. And so we had taken our van and were transporting a lot of chairs over to their home so they could have a little bit more space to meet with people.
Yeah.
And the meeting was over, and we were bringing the chairs back, putting them back in our van. And it was just kind of a parade of people, each one carrying a couple of chairs. And so I was in part of the parade, and I didn't realize that my son Daniel was following me.
Yeah.
And as we were going, we were just crossing this small street. It wasn't a huge street, but of course he was pretty short at the time as a 4-year-old. And as he walked, there was a car parked there, and as he was following me across the street, there was a car that was coming down the road that didn't see him.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't realize he was right behind me. And the car, when he finally saw little Daniel, he pushed, just slammed on the brakes, but it wasn't time for him to stop. And so he ended up actually hitting Daniel. He got thrown about 6 feet and landed face down on the street. And so, of course, as a mom, you just go running and, oh, Lord, what happened? Please, help and protect him. And I just, with fear and trembling, gently turned him over, just expecting this bruised, bleeding child. He didn't know what damage he had suffered. and he didn't have a scratch on him.
Wow.
It was just so amazing. The driver felt horrible, and he
Yeah.
actually accompanied us to the hospital just to check him out, but he was fine. There's
You're
nothing.
kidding.
So this was back in the day before internet, before
Sure.
email, when we actually sent out printed
Yeah.
newsletters. And so in our next newsletter, I just wrote and I
Hmm.
told about the story, and I titled it "Was Somebody Praying?"
Yeah.
And it was a couple months later that we actually got a written letter in the mail
Yeah.
from someone from one of our supporting churches.
Yeah.
And they had read the newsletter, and they had realized, oh my goodness, there was a day at church. It was a Sunday evening that they were kind of, no, it was actually a Sunday morning because it was evening for us in Spain. And there was, for some reason, they had like an altar time, and they
Mm.
normally didn't do that on a Sunday morning, but
Mm.
they did that Sunday morning. And
Yeah.
so she and her husband were up at the altar and they were praying, and the Lord just put in each one of their hearts
Yeah.
individually to pray for us as a family.
Mm.
And so they started praying and naming each one of our family members.
Wow.
And when they got the newsletter, they looked and they checked, and it was exactly the same day and time
Wow.
that the accident happened. And so she's like, yes, somebody was praying. God put that on our heart.
Yeah.
And it was just such a testimony of how
Hmm.
God stirs people's hearts to pray
Yeah.
for another, in this case, missionaries on the other side of the world in their moment
Mm.
of need,
Hmm.
and how God intervened. It was
Yeah.
amazing. We got a chance to witness to the driver and to talk to him about Jesus.
Wow.
Um, and now our son, he is actually now a missionary in Spain
Oh, cool.
with his family.
Yeah.
So it's like it's the resounding, like you throw a stone in a pool, and
Hmm.
the all of the, I don't know what you call
The
that.
ripples. Yeah.
Yeah, the effects of that,
Hmm.
they just keep on going and they go farther and farther
Yeah.
out. So their prayers not only saved him in that moment,
Mm.
but it kind of prepared him and blessed him
Yeah.
for what God was going to do in his future.
Wow.
And so the investment in prayer, you just can't underestimate it.
Hmm.
And we
Wow.
just are so grateful for our supporting churches like you guys
Mm.
that pray
Hmm.
and that are prayer covering and accomplish things that we don't even see, and
Right.
we won't know a lot of them before until eternity.
Yeah.
But they're powerful,
Yeah.
and we're just so grateful.
Thanks so much
And
for
I've kept in
sharing.
touch with her over the years. She's just been a special friend,
Wow.
and and so it's her investment, her husband's
Mm.
investment in our family and our
Hmm.
kids and what in their lives too.
Yeah. That's incredible.
Yeah.
So 40 years, that's a long time. And I'm assuming you weren't doing the exact same thing over that entire, course of your time over in Spain. So can you kind of walk us through like what were those different seasons, those different transitions that you had while you were on the fields?
Yeah. Well, we were young. We went out right from my husband was in Bible college,
Mm.
and so we just went as learners. We went and
Mm.
we partnered with missionaries. We started out in Barcelona. It was just a 2-year term,
Okay.
and we just had a shoestring budget, but God's faithful and He provided for everything that we needed. And then after that, we actually asked the national church leaders. We said, "Here we are to serve. Where
Mm.
would you like us to?"
Hmm.
And they said, "Oh, there's a church in this small town in southern Spain called Ronda, and they've been asking for the pastor there has been asking for another pastor to
Yeah.
come and take over the church." And
Hmm.
so we said, "Okay, well,"
Yeah.
and those are some of my most special memories.
Mm.
Two of our kids were born there.
Wow.
It's just a quaint little Spanish Andalusian village, but the people there, they just became our closest friends.
Hmm.
Just so many good memories of what God did.
Yeah.
We learned a lot. God just really blessed. We actually had a chance to go back to that town, that city, a couple years ago, and see many of the same people that were,
Hmm.
children, or they were youth when we
Yeah.
were there, and they're still serving the Lord.
Mm.
Many are in ministry, and actually the pastor of that church now, he was in our Sunday school class when we pastored there years ago. So just awesome just to
Yeah.
see the. And after that, we just said, okay, the Lord just opened a door through a friend that said, hey, there's a city over here that they really need a church.
Yeah.
There's a couple of people that have been meeting in a home, and would you go and plant a church there? And we did. We were there for 9 years, and and now it's a thriving church,
Yeah.
and they're planting churches out of that. So it's beautiful to see. And then the majority of our time actually was in Madrid,
Okay.
and the Lord led us there. Actually, kind of through a back door type of thing. Our two youngest kids, they were in school, and we just really felt like we wanted them to have it was a Christian school experience, a school just outside of Madrid that was started for missionary kids.
Okay.
And we felt like that was where God, wanted them to be to help them with their transition when
Yeah.
they went back to the State College. And so I offered to teach there because I have a teaching degree, and so I was able to teach there, and they finished their schooling there. And that's at the time we got involved with an evangelism ministry in Madrid called On the Red Box.
Okay.
And ever since we started out in missions, on our prayer card we had the verse Colossians 4:4 that said, "Pray that I may proclaim the gospel clearly." And so people were praying that for us for years and
Yeah.
years, and that's what the Lord was doing. He was revealing things in our hearts, tools that we could give people on how to share their faith. And so when we got involved with On the Red Box in Madrid, it was just the perfect timing just to work right alongside. Our giftings came together with some of the needs,
Yeah.
and we were able to help start an evangelism school, an online school, both in English and Spanish, and just over the years create all kinds of tools that help people to share their testimony, to
Yeah.
how to start a conversation, how to do creative illustrated messages. And then we put all this into practice on the street and just see God move and
Wow.
people come to the Lord. Ministries launched. So that was kind of the bulk of our
Yeah.
ministry experience there,
Yeah.
was there in Madrid.
Very cool. Can you share a couple of stories that came out of the On the Red Box? So either, through people that use the tools that you guys were creating, either or even through yourselves.
Oh, there's so many. A couple of the ones one that is just really sticks out in my mind. So we'd go out into the plaza, and it was open air preaching, but it wasn't it was more engaging.
Yeah.
It wasn't the kind of stereotypical that a lot of people think of,
Sure.
that's, yelling at people. It's creative messages that draw a crowd. We had a singer who wrote songs just for the street,
Wow.
and that would always draw a crowd, and people would share their testimonies in just 2 minutes, and so that people can identify with that, and then we'd
Yeah.
engage people in conversations. So we were out there one night, and there was a young man. He had a Christian background, came from Mexico, but he wasn't following the Lord. And God just got a hold of his heart, and he gave his life to the Lord. I think he probably considers that his conversion
Sure.
experience.
Yeah.
And over time, God just got a hold of his heart, just filled him with such a passion, and he became part of the leadership team.
Wow.
And he was an amazing communicator. He's also just a heart for prayer. Anyway, he ends up he wanted to get baptized, and so for the first time, and I think that was probably the last time it happened, we got permission to actually do a baptism right there in the main plaza in Madrid.
Wow.
And so he's out there publicly
Yeah.
giving testimony of what Jesus has done in his life, getting baptized. And while that's happening, there's another young man that's watching that we didn't know anything about him, but
Yeah.
he was just sobbing and sobbing and sobbing. And when some people went over to talk to him and minister to him, he also had a Christian background, but he was not following the Lord.
Yeah.
And And so at that moment, he was just repenting.
Hmm.
And he actually gave his life to the Lord at the same time that this other young man was getting baptized. And
Wow.
he's been in ministry since.
Wow.
And so, the first one, he actually ended up launching his own ministry in missions in the country of Turkey.
Okay.
And he facilitated many, many, many teams of believers, mostly from Latin America,
Mm.
to go and get involved in sharing the gospel in Turkey and also other cities
Yeah.
in the Arab world.
Hmm.
So, just what God does
Yeah.
with a little bit of faithfulness.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing.
Definitely. So you kind of sharing that story made me think of, you were talking about, how he is from Mexico and now he's going to Turkey, and just made me think of the fact that a lot of times missionaries, are kind of in an area with other missionaries from other places and from other, churches and things that we maybe back in the States don't really think about. We don't really think about that context or that environment. So what is that like being overseas and kind of having, the things that God's laying on your heart and the things that you're doing, but then also what does the collaboration or the interaction look like with other people who, either have specific things that God is calling them to do, or maybe, you guys have very aligned. I mean, obviously, overall, there's a very aligned purpose of, expanding the kingdom. But yeah, can you talk a little bit more about that, about working with other missionaries that would maybe be outside of your own organization or even just your own experience?
Yeah. Well, when you're outside of the U.S., the evangelical world is a lot smaller.
Mm.
So, Europe, there are the majority of countries, it has less than 2%, and in many cases, less than 1%
Hmm.
are born again believers.
Yeah.
And so when you are around other believers, you value
Yeah.
their friendship, you value those connections
Mm.
so much, and just try to support each other, encourage each other,
Mm-hmm.
even if you're doing different ministries.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of collaboration, I would
Mm.
say. The Well, part of it was the school that my kids went to and that I taught at. There was a variety of denominations,
Mm.
but there was just a bond,
Yeah.
um, of unity. And then also the ministry of On the Red Box. It was actually open to people of any denomination to
Mm-hmm.
come and help. People would come. There's a lot of immigration that's taken place in Spain in the
Mm.
last 20 years or 25 years. And so there are people from a lot of Latin American countries. There are
Mm-hmm.
people from Eastern European countries like Romania, also, in African countries. Nigeria has a lot of believers that
Mm-hmm.
are in Spain. So they are all welcome to come, and then we
Mm-hmm.
just work together,
Yeah.
and just a variety of backgrounds. But what unites us is we just want to reach people, and
Mm-hmm.
it's so beautiful how the Lord sends people from other countries
Yeah.
to minister, in Spain, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And so here we are, from all these different countries. And there are some Spaniards on our team,
Hmm.
and they are so grateful.
Yeah.
They're so grateful. Thank you for coming to our country. Thank
Mm-hmm.
you for. I remember one time when we were traveling around doing our project of filming testimonies from
Mm-hmm.
every province of Spain.
Okay.
We were down in the southern part of Spain, and we had just met the ones that we were filming their story. We had
Yeah.
just met them. And so there wasn't like a long, background or friendship,
Yeah.
but it so touched me the day that we were leaving and they were saying goodbye and they were giving us some gifts, special things from, special food from their area, things like
Mm.
that. And the man, who is very kind of quiet and more of a serious type, but I guess still waters run deep, and
Mm.
he said, thank you for investing the best years of your life in
Wow.
our country. And I never thought about it that way, but
Yeah.
that just so blessed me,
Mm.
to recognize, yeah, there is a lot of sacrifice.
Mm.
It's a privilege,
Yeah.
but it's still a sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, yeah, there's something special. We're just bonds with people from all different backgrounds
Mm-hmm.
and denominations.
Yeah, absolutely. So being there for such a long time and going through so many different seasons of ministry, what were some of the changes that you just saw even in culture, in the country itself, either whether it was due to either things that were happening, just even new generations, being born or being raised up? What were some of those changes that you noticed within the people that you were serving when you were there?
Well, I would say probably one of the most notable is the secularism.
Mm,
Spain is known for being a Catholic country,
mm,
but it's maybe culturally Catholic, but not
sure.
really practicing Catholic.
Right.
I think maybe in the smaller towns, there's more of that,
Mm-hmm.
more religion. The bigger cities, of course, typically not as much.
Yeah.
But secularism in the sense that the newer generation, they would consider themselves atheists or agnostic
Mm,
much more than they would consider themselves Catholic
sure.
or of course evangelical. So that's really taken hold in the culture
Mm,
that God is farther from their minds.
mm,
It's basically secularism. Your God is yourself.
yeah.
It's all about me, what I want, what I decide. So that's really shaped the culture a lot. Even in the 40 years that we've been there, we
Mm-hmm.
could see that. On the positive side, one thing that's shaped the culture, maybe made people more open
Mm,
to the gospel, has been the immigration.
okay.
Because when we first started, it's like, we're Spaniards and we're Catholics,
Mm,
and if you're not, then you're a cult.
mm,
But as so many people came in from other countries, Latin
yeah.
American countries, and a lot of believers,
Hmm.
a lot of evangelicals immigrated
Yeah.
and actually intermarried
Hmm.
with a lot of the Spaniards.
Yeah.
And so that kind of opened their mind up to, oh, there's more.
Yeah.
You know, there's more out there than we
Mm,
realize is us. And it helped the churches to grow
mm,
because there were a lot of believers that came in. And here's one thing that's interesting too, how God works. A lot of the immigrants that came in, even though they may have had higher class jobs in their home
mm,
country, when they got to Spain, the jobs that they had were basically, like cleaning a house
hmm.
or caring for an elderly person in their
Yeah.
home. But you know what? They brought the gospel with them.
Mm,
So here you'd have, someone from Latin America who spent 6, sometimes even 7 days a week in a Spanish home,
mm-hmm.
and they're talking about Jesus. They're
Yeah.
praying with the family. So just how God uses it all.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't
Yeah.
waste a thing.
Right. Exactly. Well, talking about these different changes in ministry, different changes in the culture, is there anything that you have noticed has changed within you and your husband? Like, how has ministry, being on the missions field, how has that changed you guys?
Wow, that's a very good question. Um, I think early on, you notice the big things, the
Mm,
cultural difference.
mm-hmm.
One of the things that I've really learned to love about Spain is
Mm-hmm.
that they are very people oriented and not as much task
Yeah.
oriented as we are here in the States. So, for example, when you go out to eat with someone, you plan on being with them for several hours.
Mm,
And after the meal, whether you're in a restaurant or in a home, basically you're there for several hours. They have what they call the sobremesa, which means around the table, and
mm,
it's just talking.
yeah.
It's just a time. It's relational.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just to eat. It's to be with
Mm-hmm.
them,
Yeah.
and I love that relational aspect, and I think
Mm-hmm.
it's helped me to value people a lot more,
Mm,
to slow down,
yeah.
um, to just appreciate relationships. We would
Mm,
come home, and our neighbors would be out, and we would literally just stop and chat with our neighbors for half an hour or an hour before we'd go in, because that's important.
Yeah.
And, and it just becomes part of you after a while. I really love that. I think farther on in our ministry, well, God, He goes deep
Yeah.
in us. He uses things to shape us, to change us. And really the goal is to make us more like Jesus, which means we're going to go through hard things.
Yeah.
You know? So there are mountaintops when you see God move, when there's a lot of fruit, and then there's valleys where it's dry and barren,
Yeah.
and you just have to walk through. And as you do, he's changing things on the inside. So he's not in a hurry.
Yeah.
He uses everything.
Yeah.
And, as he never promised that our lives would be perfect or always happy, but he did promise that he'd always be with us.
Yeah.
And so I guess that's what we've learned, is just walking with him and listening and saying yes in every situation.
Yeah.
Even hard things.
Yeah.
Because to say yes.
So maybe they're similar and maybe they're not, I don't know. But I think, when we think of the concept of mountains and valleys, and, thinking about potentially what that would look like for somebody back in the States or a missionary, to me that maybe would look different. I don't know, maybe not. So can you share with us an example of, maybe one of those valleys, and then how God brought you out of it, and then what it was like kind of coming through the other side, being then on that mountaintop and being able to look back and just realizing that God was with you all along?
Well, it was in one of the cities where we planted a church, and early on, the Lord had spoken to Kevin and just said, "I just do whatever I put in your heart to do. I'm not interested in your good ideas. I want you to follow me.
Yeah,
Follow what I put in your spirit."
that's good.
And he was actually on a mountaintop looking over the city and praying over it when the Lord spoke that to him.
Yeah.
And the Lord put in his heart to have a church retreat. And so
Okay.
he thought, he'd been really seeking the Lord about evangelism, and he thought, a church retreat, what does that have to do with evangelism? But that's what the Lord put in his heart. And
Yeah.
so we did a church retreat. We just had a small group of believers, and it was at one of the members of our church. Her husband wasn't saved, but his family had like a little house area in the country, and so we could meet there. But he was there just kind of keeping an eye on things.
Yeah.
He was there listening to everything. And after many years of being really resistant to the gospel, he got saved
Wow.
at that retreat. And so it was like, oh wow, when God puts something in your spirit and you do it, it works. But then the Lord didn't give him any more instruction for a long time.
Yeah.
And it was like, but Lord, and the Lord is like, I'm doing something inside. I'm doing something inside. And it was a dry time. It was a hard time inside. We were still carrying on with the ministry, the church planning, but as far as evangelism and actually, specific ways to reach out to people, God was silent. And so it was, what are you doing? But you learn to die to things of yourself. You learn to listen to him and to follow. And long story short, we were coming to the end of our time, and the Lord had given us all these promises, and we were saying, Lord, where's the answer? Where's the fulfillment of your promises?
Yeah.
We'd been saving up for many years to purchase a building, and we just were not finding it, and our time was coming to a close. Like, Lord, what's the future of this church?
Yeah.
And it was kind of like you come to the end of yourself. And I remember we had seen a place, and we had the church members there, but we just felt like God's not in this. It's just learning to follow the Spirit and his guidance. God's not in this. And so we said no to that, to the possibility, that the building that we had looked at. And I just remember sitting outside on the sidewalk in front of my house, and it was like the death of a dream. It's like, okay, God, I don't know what's going on here. I don't know
Yeah.
what you're doing. I just have to give it all to you. And the next day, I was cleaning my house, but I was down and just down in the dumps. And there was a cassette tape. This is back in the day of cassette tapes. And it was basically songs that were based on scripture. And so I said, well, I can listen to that. I can listen to that. And there was one song there about praying in the Spirit. So I just started praying in the Spirit. And while we got a phone call from a realtor that had been working with us and helping us all these years. And she said, I just found something. And I knew in my spirit,
Yeah.
and when I told Kevin, he knew in his spirit, this was the answer
Yeah.
to God's promise and God's prayers. And it was just like boom, boom, boom. It was a done deal, and the church is still in that building today, has lots of room to grow. It's just an amazing place, amazing opportunity for ministry. But we had to go through a dry season before
Yeah.
we got there.
Yeah.
But we learned God is faithful, that we just have to depend on Him and trust Him no matter how long it takes.
Yeah, absolutely. That can be one of the hardest things where logically it seems to all fit and it makes sense. And then God says no, or God says wait.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah, you have to make that decision. Am I
yeah,
going to do what I think is the best fit here, or am I just going to trust and I'm going to sacrifice what I think is the ideal situation or the
yeah.
ideal thing, and know that God has it under control and He has something better and He knows what He's doing.
That's right. That's right. It's just trusting Him.
Yeah. So I want to rewind back to where it all started. Can you talk to us a little bit about your guys' call to missions, and then kind of once that call was confirmed, or once it was even started for the first time, what did that journey look like then? Once you and maybe you and Kevin together, or maybe it was separately. How did that then transpire into you guys being in Spain?
Yeah, good question. Well, I'm a Minnesota girl. I grew up in Plymouth,
Okay.
and I was raised in a Lutheran family, very godly family, but religious. They didn't really know the Lord. And but I tried to be a good person. I tried to do right. But I think I was about 14, and my best friend and I, we were walking through a park, and a couple of young women that were on staff with Campus Crusade for Christ, now it's called Cru, they just came up to us and started talking to us about how they had met Jesus, how He had changed their lives. And I saw something in them that I didn't have.
Yeah.
They had an assurance that they were in, and I didn't have that. They
Yeah.
knew they were going to heaven, and I didn't know that. And so I prayed with them right there.
Wow.
And I just talked to Jesus, and I said, I'm so sorry for the things that I've done that have displeased you. Tried to be good, but I know that I haven't always accomplished that. Come into my life. I
Yeah.
want to follow you from this day on. And, it was kind of like a light switch flipped
Wow.
on in my heart. I think that year I asked for a Bible for Christmas. My parents were probably, what's going on with her? I just had a hunger for God.
Yeah.
I would just read the Bible. I felt like because I was still a minor, I needed to go to church with them to honor them.
Sure.
But it was like getting water from a rock. I just couldn't get any food, any spiritual nourishment. But my parents gave me the freedom to go to, cruise meetings and
Yeah.
conferences and events, and that's where I got discipled. That's how I grew in
Okay.
the Lord.
Yeah.
And so I was so grateful for that. And so it was at one of those conferences that there was a speaker. It was in Indianapolis, and he was talking about, and I'm sure the stats have changed because this was a while ago,
Yeah.
said that here in the States, we have 10% of the world's population, but 90% of the full-time Christian workers.
Mm,
So the flip side is that the remaining 90% of the world's population have to share only 10% of the
mm,
full-time Christian workers.
yeah.
And my heart was just so burdened. I
Mm,
said, Lord, I want to be one of those
yeah.
that go. I want to be one of those.
Mm,
And so it was a burden on my heart.
yeah.
And I went to the University of Minnesota and I majored in elementary education and
Mm,
minored in Spanish with missions
okay.
in mind.
Yeah.
Because you can get into a lot of countries as a teacher when you
Yeah.
can't get in as a missionary.
Right.
And there are a lot of Spanish speaking countries. I didn't know
Mm.
I'd be going to Spain, but that worked out
Yeah.
well. And so while I was there, I was part of a Chi Alpha group,
Mm,
a college Christian group,
mhm.
and a lot of college age students. And I just looked around. I said, Lord, there's nobody here for me. If you want me to get married, you have to bring somebody
Yeah.
here. And so not too long after that, Kevin moved from Michigan to Minneapolis to go to North Central.
Okay.
And he had a missions call while he was
Mm,
in campus Michigan, and his pastor had said, North Central has a really good missions program.
mm,
So he came to Minneapolis, and we met. We met at the Chi Alpha group,
mhm.
and I remember the first time. I think a whole bunch of us went out for ice cream afterwards after a church service, and someone was asking him, "So Kevin, what are you going to study at North
Mm,
Central?" And I remember thinking, "Oh, I bet he's going to say he's going to be a pastor."
mm.
Well, he's not, because I'm called to be a missionary.
Yeah.
And when he said, "Oh, I'm studying missions," it's like, "Oh." So, our calls were united. We got married
Yeah.
about a year later.
Oh, wow.
Um, and then when he finished his program, we went right overseas.
Wow.
Um, we just followed. They actually were sending a couple to each of the different areas of the world, and at the
Mm,
time there were only four. And so
okay.
we went to, what was considered Eurasia at the
Mm,
time, which included, and they asked us to go to Spain, and
yeah.
so that's where we went.
Yeah.
And the Lord gave us a heart for the people,
Mm,
and just never left.
yeah. Wow. That's incredible. So you
Yeah.
talked a little bit, you shared that incredible story about your son, that miracle, and then your kids, going to that school that you ended up working at. But what was that like, kind of, going basically straight out of college, straight out of, getting married onto the field, and kind of like you said, that man had said, giving your best years.
Mhm.
What was that like, kind of knowing like your whole life's ahead of you, and you are so dedicated to this call?
Well, it's just learning to follow Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing better than going where he
Yeah.
leads. I love the verse in Ephesians 2:10 that says, "You are created in Christ Jesus for good works, which he has prepared
Mm-hmm.
beforehand. Look in them."
Right.
So he already has a plan
Mm-hmm.
for each one of us, and it's all prepared. He has it all prepared. And so, I mean, we knew the call. We knew
Mm-hmm.
that he'd called us,
Yep.
and we wanted to follow.
Yeah.
And so, that just carries you through
Mm-hmm.
when tough times come or doubts come. Or,
Mm-hmm.
uh, one thing I realized, Amy, is that my parents sacrificed without choosing to.
Mm, sure.
I honor them so much. They both passed away, and have gone on to be with the Lord. They
Mm,
ended up having an encounter with the Lord, um, but they sacrificed.
yeah.
Well, they weren't able to see their grandkids.
Mm-hmm.
They would make the effort, to come and visit
Yeah.
as often as they could. Um, but yeah, you miss out on family things, and communication back then wasn't the same as it is now with
Right.
FaceTime and
Yeah.
do video calls and all that type of thing. Back then it was just, a long distance call
Mm-hmm.
once in a while. Um, but God gives you so much too.
Mm-hmm.
He gives you just a new perspective.
Mm-hmm.
He's there. I mean, whatever he calls us to do,
Mm-hmm.
he's with us and he reveals himself
Yeah.
in special ways that we need.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't change anything.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
Um, so you talked about how the last, I think was it 20 years that you guys were doing the Red Box Ministries and kind of
Yeah.
um, and how you were then going around and getting testimonies from each of the different regions, I think is what you called it, of Spain. What is one of those testimonies that sticks out to you?
Wow. There's
There's probably
52.
so many, yeah. Just first one that pops into your head,
Um,
I don't know, or your favorite.
well, well, this is kind of an unusual one.
Okay.
This is from just a tiny little province in Spain that doesn't have a big population.
Yeah.
The man, he's very just kind of, working class. So he's a truck driver. And, just typical background, but being a truck driver is a very lonely life. And so he was getting into things to try to fill up the emptiness, drinking and drugs and all the things that go with that. And he was just struggling so much. And one day driving, he was actually putting gas in his truck and he knew
Yeah.
exactly where he was.
Yeah.
Those moments that God spoke to you, you remember the details.
Right.
And and God spoke to him and said, when you stop tonight in Portugal, I want you to pray. So, he drove to Portugal, and when he got there, he just leans over on the steering wheel and prayed just as he knew how. And and then he has this encounter with Jesus.
Yeah.
And Jesus just says, I'm going to change your life. And
Wow.
he's having this conversation in the cab of his truck with Jesus. But I don't deserve it. Look at all the things I've done. No, don't worry. I'm going to transform you. And so he's born again. And years later, he's still driving his truck and
Yeah.
he's, finding stations on the radio, and he finds a Christian station, which there weren't a whole lot of them.
Sure.
And he starts hearing these people share their stories, and he says, other people have had the same experience that I
Yeah.
have. And so then he got connected with a local church, and that's how he got discipled and grew.
Wow.
And now he's a pastor
Wow.
in the little town where he lives, and they're starting to plant churches.
Yeah.
So let me give kind of the second part of this story.
Yes.
So after we filmed the story, we would produce a postcard with a QR code and a drawing, pen and ink drawing. And I did about half, happened to do the one for his province. And then a team would go from Redbox, to his province, and they would gather people from different churches and teach them some evangelism tools and do some evangelistic events with them. Some on the street, a concert, things like that. And so they were out on the street in this plaza, and it was a cold night. I think it was rainy. There were hardly anybody on the street, but there was one man that came by. And this happened to be a man that Antonio knew 20 years ago when he got saved, and he had witnessed to him a lot, so
Yeah.
much that the man blocked him on Facebook because he was tired of hearing about it. And but that man came by while they're in this plaza, sharing the gospel. And so he gave him the postcard with his testimony.
Yeah.
It had a QR code on the back. And so the man went over to a little cafe and he watched it on his phone. And he came back and he said, did this really happen to you? He says, yes, it did.
Yeah.
He says, that's powerful. That's powerful. And he got to pray with him. They got back in contact again. And so he can be inviting him to church. But 20 years later,
Yeah.
I mean, just how God puts those pieces together is kind of, but there's so many stories.
Yeah. Absolutely. Wow. So I'm curious, what are some of the differences? And I know you already talked about, the just culture in Spain is very relational and just a
Yeah.
different speed and mindset when it comes to those kind of things as compared to the US. But specifically, kind of thinking about like how how churches function and operate, whether that means, on a Sunday morning, whether that means kind of pastoral care. What are some of those differences that you notice between kind of the American church and the church in Spain?
Well, because the churches there are much smaller,
Mm,
they're not as professional as far as,
okay.
having sheets and time
Mm,
schedule and
yeah.
all this. It's more, um, it's just a more informal
Mm,
um, type of thing. They always have a lot of fellowship time.
mm-hmm.
It's wonderful. Oftentimes, churches would have, like snacks or things like that after service, just so to give them more time
Yeah.
to fellowship, connect. Um, I think there's probably more midweek connection as well.
Mm,
Meetings years ago, and I think it's starting to come back a little bit more.
mm,
Before all the immigration, when the churches grew from immigrants,
yeah.
they went out to the streets a lot more
Mm,
to share the gospel. I mean, they would do like kids things.
yeah.
They would do back in the day tent crusades.
Mm.
And some people I know got saved because they thought it was a circus, this big tent, on the street. And they're still in ministry today. I mean, you
Yeah.
just never know what God's
Mm-hmm.
going to use, right?
Right.
Um, and just like one-on-one conversations, it's just I think I think that's starting to come back again. And
Mm,
On the Red Box has really been trying to help mentor churches
yeah.
in that, give them tools like, here, you don't have to have a big professional show to go
Mm,
out. You can just start sharing your story, sharing your
mm,
testimony, conversation, ask them their
yeah.
opinion.
Yeah.
And so I think that's growing again, and I'm
Mm,
excited about that. I think there's just a sense, that Jesus is coming back and that he's going to start moving.
mm,
Um, I think there's a lot of signs that he's moving in the younger generation,
yeah.
signs of revival coming. So
Mm,
I think it's all going to work together with the
mm,
church going out and
mm-hmm.
being the sharing the gospel.
Mm. Can you speak more about that? About you mentioned like signs that God's moving in the next generation. What do you mean by that? What have you noticed?
Well, it's things that I hear.
Mm,
You see things on social media,
mm,
baptisms taking place on
mm-hmm.
college
Yeah.
campuses. We just had a missionary training, missionary renewal time where some of the leaders are just giving testimonies.
Mm,
Different countries around the world that have typically been very hard.
mm.
They baptized more people in Japan in the last 4 months than they have in the last 40 years.
Wow.
There's just a move. And
Yeah.
now, like in France, France is very, very secular, but
Mm,
the younger generation, they're kind of rebelling against their parents'
mm.
atheism.
Sure.
They're coming to faith. So it's just, there's a stirring. There's a
Mm,
stirring. There's hunger. There's interest.
yeah.
Just hear it from different places.
Mm-hmm.
People sharing um, testimonies and stories and messages and um, just in a lot of different places.
Yeah,
And I feel
definitely.
in my heart too that
Mm,
their birth pangs, come in.
mm-hmm.
Lots of things happening in the world,
Yep.
and I really believe that there's going to be a mighty revival before
Mm,
Jesus comes again.
mm-hmm.
We're starting to see signs of that.
Mm, yeah. So, you know, being in ministry, being on the mission fields for as long as you have, um, I would think that would kind of, influence and shape kind of your own definition and perception of what missions is, what a missionary is. So can you give us what is your definition of missions of a missionary?
Wow. Well, the traditional definition, which I think is still very valid, is
Mm,
someone that leaves their country and their culture
mm-hmm.
to go to a new country, culture,
Yep.
language,
Yep.
in many cases, um, to communicate the gospel.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's many different ways that people do that, but it's very much a going.
Mm-hmm.
It's a going. It's a leaving behind. I
Yeah.
think in a lot of ways, there's an expanded definition, oh, we're all missionaries. Well, we are all called to preach the gospel.
Sure.
We're all called to make disciples,
Yeah.
but we don't all go to another country and another
Right.
culture, which is
Yep.
a whole nother level of adaptation. And, learning another language, it's not an easy thing. You really kind of have to die a little bit to your identity.
Yeah.
You feel like kindergartner at first communicating, and you don't get the jokes for a long time. Feel like an outsider, but just even making the effort really endears you to
Yeah.
people. And they recognize a lot. Some of them, a lot of them, really.
Yeah. That's good. So somebody who, is interested in mission, somebody who is feeling like, there's something going on in their heart when they hear a story from a missionary, or when they hear about some of these statistics like you did that kind of prompted your call. And so they have that feeling, they have, that curiosity, but they don't know, they don't, know for certain that they're called. What would you say to that person?
Oh, that's great. And I know God's calling. God is calling. I think the first question is, if God calls you, would you say yes?
Yeah.
That's the first question,
Right.
because it's a series of yeses. Follow-
Yeah.
I would say start doing those things now where you are. Share your faith.
Yeah.
Because once you step foot on another land, you don't automatically transform into a different spiritual person,
Right. Yeah.
We're developing those things now. So share your faith now.
Yeah.
Make disciples now. Serve in your church now. All those things that you would need to do in another setting,
Yep.
do them where you are.
Right.
Let the Lord use you to win people to Him. Learn to share your faith. Learn to lead a Bible study. All those things will prepare you. And even if you don't go overseas, God's going to use you. I mean, we're all called to make disciples.
Yeah.
We're all called to share the gospel.
Right.
So, put those things into practice and get into the Word, get into prayer, learn how to hear the Lord, all of those spiritual disciplines. There's also practical things, go on a missions trip.
Yeah.
That'll open your eyes and your heart. A lot of people get called to
Right.
missions on a missions trip. And there's a lot of other short-term experiences. You can go over as a missionary associate. That could be, well, you could be a maps worker, which in Assemblies of God terminology is 11 months or less. There's a lot of internship type of things that you can do. Then a missionary associate would be 1 to 2 years.
Yeah.
And that's, it's a little bit longer term, but it gives you a bigger picture of what missions is like. And I know that they say in a lot of places, give a year, pray about a lifetime. So a year is not that big of a commitment, depending on your stage of
Yeah,
life. But
you're
if you're
right.
college age or just getting out of college, there's an opportunity to get that experience. And even if it is just gaining an experience, a different view of the world and of people, that's valuable. And you learn all kinds of skills along the way, trusting the Lord and seeing Him work and learning to follow Him. I would say there's a missions website called wideopenmissions.org. And it's also called the Pipeline. And so that has just a myriad of opportunities, different kinds of missions opportunities in all different countries around the world.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like shopping for a missions experience.
Sure.
And you can, just see what there is and see what people are interested in. Even asking questions,
Yeah.
it doesn't commit you. It just informs. So that's just a great way to get your feet wet and find out what's up.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned teams or short-term missions trips. So I'm curious, on the missionary side of things, on your side of things, did you host many teams over your 40 years?
Oh, yeah, we did. On the Red Box is very open to hosting missions teams. We're in a transition time right now that we heard about in our newsletter a couple years back. So, and this is all kind of part of saying yes to Jesus.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, the Lord asked Kevin, he said, "Are you willing to go wherever I want you to
Mm.
go?" And it was one of those serious moments like, okay, Lord, what does this mean? You
Yeah.
know, are you sending me to Africa? Um, and, he just said, "Lord, I've been following you for 40 years. I'm not going to stop now."
Hmm.
And that just kind of, it just, then a peace just came.
Yeah.
And and it wasn't long after that that the Lord said, because you've chosen to follow me, this is what I have for you.
Mm.
And he actually showed us, we were visiting my daughter who was having a baby at the time.
Mm.
And he showed us a property and a place. And it's like, this is where I want you to go. And
Mm.
it was Springfield, Missouri,
Okay.
a place that we had always said we'll never live there, along with a lot of other people.
Yeah.
And but it was what God had asked.
Mm.
And so it was like, it was really a grieving time.
Mm.
We don't really think about grieving, with a transition to the States. We
Yeah.
usually think about grieving the States when you go somewhere else.
Right.
But 40 years overseas is a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And like we were super intentional about training our team
Mm.
and putting things into place. And we were still working with the project of the films
Yeah.
for several more years. So we've actually made like 7 trips
Wow.
back and forth. Just keep. So that's been wonderful. But the
Mm.
year before I remember I love to walk, and we lived right on the edge of kind of countryside, and I go
Mm-hmm.
out for a walk. And I was out there, and I said, "Lord, I feel like I'm leaving you behind
Mm.
because I loved what we were doing. I loved our ministry. I
Yeah.
loved it was, a time of just fruitfulness.
Mm.
And Lord, I don't know what I'm going to. I don't know where you're
Mm.
leading." And the next morning, I had been reading through the book of John, and the next
Yeah.
morning it was John 14,
Mm.
and where Jesus says, "I go to prepare a place for you,
Mm.
that where I am, you may be also."
Yeah.
And so I wasn't leaving him behind,
Mm-hmm.
but he
Mm-hmm.
and he was prepared. And so that was my word that I held on to during, the first steps of that transition, which were probably the hardest thing that we've ever done.
Mm.
But we're seeing the place he's preparing and the doors that he's opening.
Yeah.
So during this transition, we've been still involved with On the Red Box,
Mm-hmm.
preparing all these tools of evangelism, the
Yeah.
films. But God's also opened up opportunities to minister in Latin America,
Mm.
which is a lot closer
Yeah.
from here than
Mm-hmm.
going to Europe as well as Latin America. And to be involved in another ministry as well called Inspire, which
Mm.
is it's all about evangelism, just the
Mm.
same as Red Box.
Yeah.
It's inspire women and girls
Mm.
to inspire the next one to know Jesus.
Yeah.
It's coming alongside women, churches, missionaries, national pastors in countries across Europe and now in Latin America um, to help them learn how to share their faith,
Mm.
sharing your faith.
Yeah.
Because they say that 94% of churchgoers
Mm.
have never shared their faith with
Mm.
anyone. 94%. So
Yeah.
part of it is to change that statistic
Mm-hmm.
and
Absolutely.
give them tools. And so it's just saying yes to Jesus at every season. And
Yeah.
this is a season I didn't expect,
Mm.
but I mean, but I know it's a season that God's in.
Yep.
And so it's such a privilege to serve him, to be part of sharing the gospel, no matter what form it takes.
Mm-hmm.
And we're just so grateful to you guys for being a part of it as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us and share about your ministry and your life on the field and kind of this new season. that you're kind of, I think it sounds like, are still in the middle of kind of figuring out what it's going to turn into. But we're so honored to have the opportunity to partner with you and support the work that God is doing through you. And we look forward to seeing what God does next.
Yeah, it'll be good. It is good. It's a wonderful opportunity, and Inspire also takes a lot of missions teams to come and work alongside. So not only the women and the girls and the locations are transformed, but the missions teams as well,
Yeah,
as they
absolutely.
often go back to their churches like inspired to share their faith where they are. What it's all about.
Yeah,